You might think that, after last issue's cliffhanger, Geoff Johns would pick things up back where he left off, with Black Manta having just arrived at the home of Dr. Shin, ready to face down Mera. But nope. Issue 11 actually opens up 6 years ago, with Aquaman and the others inside of an ancient site. They're in a beautiful throne room made of stone. They've entered the room through a pool of water that lays at the base of a set of stairs. A complex statue rests at the top of them. 4 mermaids seem to erupt from stone waves behind a roughly hewn throne. In the hands of the mermaids are several golden objects. What we now know to be the Atlantean artifacts that the others carry. Resting against the throne is a trident. This is the lost tomb of the first king of Atlantis, Arthur says as he approaches the throne. No one remembers his name. The Atlanteans just call him the Dead King. He's the one who built Atlantis, and he forged these weapons. He picks up the trident. These are what Black Manta has been searching for. Yawara points out that these relics, this place, it's all part of Arthur's heritage. He should be amazed by this. But he isn't. These things are just bait, as far as he's concerned. Vostok, who in this flashback does not have the golden helmet on yet, quietly asks, how can he care about them so little? Arthur tells Vostok a story. When Atlantis began to sink, the Dead King had a brief window of time. He could get to a ship and escape, but instead he chose to rush back into the palace in order to save his wife and children. They never came back out. So what exactly does the trident matter? In Germany, that very same trident now passes through empty air as Black Manta teleports away from Aquaman's attack, and he curses. Yawara adds that Manta could be anywhere now using her globe of transportation. The operative drops onto a nearby rooftop. He knows where Black Manta has gone. And so do we. Manta materializes in the home of Dr. Stephen Shin. His big red eyes stare at the man and Mera. Mera tackles him immediately. My name is Ben, and this is Comic Book Breakdown, episode 26.7 of Aquaman, Indiana Manta, and the 7th Relic of Atlantis. This opening scene is some neat background, I guess, but is it terribly important to get right now? We have so much drama going on with Black Manta and Aquaman and the others, and lives are on the line, and somebody's died already. Is this really relevant? Is this going to be on the test, Geoff Johns?
Yes, it is. This scene might feel relatively disconnected from the rest of what's been going on, but Johns is setting up some important ideas for use later in the issue.
The only other thing of real note here is the consistency with which young Arthur is depicted. Johns has shown young Arthur to be angry, dismissive, and generally uncaring about the people around him. He's still like that here, snapping at the others a little bit in conversation, telling Vostok how little everything means. Because to Arthur, without his father, nothing has meaning. Nothing matters. Otherwise, this is a short 3-page sequence, and it does a lot in 3 pages, but it doesn't distract us for very long at all. Author Geoff Johns and the creative team get us right back into the thick of it, reminding us of where Aquaman was at before bringing us back to Mera, and the threat of Black Manta. When we return to Mera, she has already tackled Manta. She yanks off his mini harpoon and crushes it in one hand. He also has a glowing 2-pronged, hand fork in his left hand, and she grabs that and smashes it in one hand as well. Mera tells him that she's actually glad that he's here. Now she can kill him, end all of this, and her and Arthur can go back to their regular lives. Black Manta replies that Arthur doesn't deserve happiness. Mera says that Manta doesn't deserve mercy. Oh, I like these two in the same scene. Mera's hands wrap around Black Manta's throat, digging into the apparatus that seals his helmet on. She threatens to drain him dry of all the water in his body, and then she's going to use it to flood his lungs. That's not going to work, though. Mara's hydrokinesis needs to connect with her target through some form of subtle telepathy, Black Manta says. But his costume has bioelectric seals which are blocking her, keeping her powers out. He can also feed that electrical charge back, and he does so, shocking Mara. It doesn't kill her, it just throws her back, forcing her to release him. But that small moment is all the time that Black Manta needs. He grabs Dr. Shin and teleports away.
Neat scene. Oh.
Back in the airplane called the living room, Aquaman and the others have gathered. The operative gestures to a map that he has laid out on a table. He took these from Manta's safe house. They lead to a location, one that Arthur recognizes. The Dead King's tomb. But why? The operative says that Manta thinks that there is a seventh artifact. The others find that really hard to believe. They searched every inch of that tomb and took all of the relics that they could find. The operative says that whoever Manta is working with, they've got him convinced that there's a seventh. Something that is even stronger than the trident. A warning alarm suddenly goes off. Something or someone has attached to the hull of the living room. Aaron, having left the plane on autopilot, is present in the scene, and he's actually a little bit nervous because he gets to see the Aquaman. Whew, this is exciting. But the operative is calm. He was actually wondering when he would show up. Depressing a button, a hatch at the back of the craft opens, and Vostok X flies in on his jetpack. With a hoarse voice, he croaks out, "Hello." Then he pulls off his helmet, revealing a bearded face. His hair is black, with thick eyebrows. "He hasn't spoken in 2 years, so they'll have to forgive him." Yawara stares at him. 2 years? You have been sitting on the moon for 2 years? Doing what? Vostok simply smiles in reply. It's good to see everyone, he says. "Where is Kahina?" Aquaman eases out onto the hatch. She's dead, and he's leaving. There is a brief back and forth amongst the cast as the others try to convince Arthur not to leave on his own. This ultimately culminates in Prisoner saying that he doesn't think Arthur cares about them. Arthur tries to argue the point, but Prisoner just cuts him off. No, it's absolutely true, Arthur. You haven't seen any of us since you joined the Justice League. You forgot about us. Well, Prisoner can't forget about anyone. He misses the families of his squads, their parents, their wives, their kids. He misses them like they were his own, and there is nothing that he can do about it. They aren't his family. He has no one. Arthur at least has the League. The operative has a more practical view of things. The League shouldn't be put on any kind of pedestal. There are things that the others can do that they can't. For example, his contacts in China, the US Navy, and the Pacific Fleet all have their armed forces scouring the ocean for Manta. He jokes that that is what his real gift is, getting everyone to work with him. Except for Arthur. Yawara tries next. Manta came after all of them. This isn't a threat for Aquaman, this is a threat for them. They should all hunt him together. But Arthur won't allow it. He is the one who killed Manta's father. Manta is doing all of this because of him, and he's not going to risk their lives. He goes alone so that he can protect them. He goes alone because he does care about them. A gloved hand touches Arthur's shoulder, and then Vostok pulls it back immediately. Human contact is hard for him. It turns out that Vostok was raised in a solitary chamber outside of the Baikonur Cosmodrome. He was trained to be Russia's ideal cosmonaut, but then the Union fell apart. He was released, and having never seen another human being, he feared them. Vostok escaped into the mountains, which is where the others found him. Yawara wanted to know what he was doing on the moon. He was waiting for them to reach out. Vostok could only fight his programming so much. He needs that distance from other people. It's a part of him. But for Arthur, he has a choice here. He can be with people if he wants to be. His burdens can be shared. Arthur looks over the others. Cold wind whips at him. His eyes thin. Not this time, Vostok. He turns around and leaps off of the plane. But as he plunges to the ground, we can see anger and regret and internalized pain clear on Arthur's face. He perfectly dives into the ocean below, and the Aquaman swims away. Well, the way he swims, the operative says, he's going to beat them to the island. Yawara says that she knows who Arthur will listen to. They're going to need her. Obviously, they mean Mera, but we'll get to that. The Mera versus Manta fight scene is super short, but it does exactly what Geoff Johns needs it to, and I really like this. Mera is portrayed as a smart, cunning fighter. I love that the first thing she does is she immediately destroys or disables all of Manta's main weapons before going for the man himself. She isn't just super strong, and she doesn't just manipulate water. She's got a good head on her shoulders, too. That's great. We also learn a little bit more about Mera's hydrokinesis power, that she is telepathically influencing the water. I've referred to her powers as being water bending a few times in these episodes, and I probably just took that generalization for granted, because Manta demonstrates that Mera cannot manipulate just any water. He is able to actually use his suit to interrupt her powers, which just continues to show how smart and deadly he is. From what we know, and how they act in this scene, this seems to be the first time that Black Manta and Mera have met each other, and yet Manta is already prepared for her. This guy is good at what he does. Which ties nicely into the end of this scene, in which Manta escapes with the very thing that he came here for, Dr. Shin and his notes. Manta is crushing being one step ahead of these heroes. The Aquaman portion of this scene is far more emotionally charged. I'm really beginning to suspect that author Geoff Johns is an anime fan, because this scene in the living room is just so anime. Oh, Aquaman trying to protect his friends because he doesn't want them to get hurt is such an anime trope. Plus, his friends are willing to fight with him because they want to protect him from getting hurt as well. This is anime AF, and I love every second of it, because all of it fits perfectly into the characters too. It's not just a really well executed trope, it's really well executed character work that fits the trope. Ooh. After all, Arthur's biggest loss in his life is his father, someone who died as a result of trying to protect him. Why wouldn't he suspect that the others, who are all human, remember, could be just as fragile? We have seen Aquaman shrug off stuff like speeding cars, bullets, fangs, claws. Hell, a day ago, he had a massive piece of shrapnel in his right leg, and right now, physically, he's doing fine. If I was Aquaman, I wouldn't think that I needed anybody else to protect me either. Just stay at home, guys, and let me handle this. It's for your own good. Oh. I love the operative's dig at Arthur, too, when he says that he can get anybody to work together except for Arthur. That not only fits really well with the way that Johns has portrayed young Arthur in the flashbacks with the others, but with how modern Arthur has been acting once the threat of Black Manta became clear. Despite his alliances with the others, Aquaman feels and acts very much apart from the rest of them. Yawara wants to fight beside Arthur because she's basically the jungle female variant of him. Prisoner doesn't believe that Arthur cares about them all because he cares so deeply for his old unit that nobody can have that depth of feeling for someone else. And then Vostok wants to believe that Arthur cares so badly that he'll believe it even if Arthur doesn't act that way. This scene is actually the first time that we get to see Vostok as a person for any real length of time, and what we get expands on everything that we've seen before. When the others were saving the Russian villagers, we saw Vostok connect with the villagers emotionally, saying that they're Russian like him. This perfectly matches what we see here, which is Vostok connecting with the others against his programming. And I love this guy for it. He has been programmed to prefer isolation, but we've got him reaching out. He is trying to connect with people so bad. When Arthur seems emotionally torn, conflicting between wanting their help and wanting to protect them, Vostok touches his shoulder, and that has to be so hard for him to do. This is a guy who just spent 2 years on the moon by himself, without another human being for conversation or physical touch, and here he's trying to reach out to Arthur. That is how much he cares, how much he wants to help this person that he considers a friend. That is anime as floop, and I love it. But Aquaman leaves them all anyways, because he honestly loves them too. It seems stupid and pig-headed and arrogant, but these people were there for Arthur at a time when he had no one else in his world. They've even reunited against his wishes, and here they are trying to help once more. I also love the dynamic here between the others and Arthur's other group, the Justice League. Admittedly, this run hasn't really referenced the Justice League all that much, but I would like to point out that author Geoff Johns was writing that comic book as well. There was almost no synergy between the two titles, so it's not like the Justice League is required reading for this Aquaman run. But it does look like there's a difference between Arthur's relationships to the two teams. Aquaman regularly goes into battle with the Justice League after all. He isn't trying to protect them. I'm sure that he does when they're in battle, don't get me wrong, he isn't heartless. But the League is almost like a separate group entirely, while the others, they feel a lot more like family in this scene. It's a MCU Guardians of the Family style found family, sure, but these people are closer to Arthur than the League is emotionally. When Prisoner points out that Arthur has been working with them and not with the others, it isn't because he likes the League more than the others. It's because Aquaman can survive if the League gets hurt. And they're much less likely to get hurt because most of them are superhuman. He can't stand the idea of the others being hurt, or even worse, killed. Notice that Aquaman didn't really want to get involved in all of this when Yawara came to him, until the threat of Black Manta had been proven by the death of Kahina. Arthur is in this for revenge. Sure, I definitely think that's a motivating factor for him, but I also think that he is more there to try to keep his friends safe, to protect them from Black Manta. This character has ended up being way more fascinating than I thought he was going to be when going into this comic again. Wow. We follow Aquaman to the Dead King's tomb, which resides inside of a crescent-shaped island. It's really pretty. It looks beautiful. He sneaks onto the island, past a sleek-looking black and red manta-themed submarine. It doesn't take long for Arthur to work his way to the throne room, where Black Manta and his lackeys have set up shop. Floodlights fill the tomb with blue light. The lackeys are scanning armored statues and columns with equipment that's emitting a green light. Several of them are armed, waiting for something to happen, for anyone to show up. Standing by the throne is Black Manta and Shin. "Where is it?" Manta asks. "How do I find the 7th relic?" Arthur is surprised to see Shin here, and remember, he didn't know that Manta picked him up. But the scientist kneels, facing the throne. He won't tell Manta. He betrayed Arthur once. He will never do it again. Manta, now equipped with a new mini harpoon launcher on his arm, aims it at the back of Shin's head. "Tell me, or die." Arthur can't believe this. If Shin isn't working with Manta, then who is? The dramatic scene is suddenly interrupted. One of the lackeys has found the key in Shin's notes. 2 of the relics together can triangulate the position of the hidden one. Manta holds up the Seal of Clarity and the Golden Orb. They need to activate them all at the same time. He passes the seal to the lackey and has him translate the hieroglyphics on the wall. Then Manta activates the orb, and suddenly a resounding boom fills the space. In his hiding place, Arthur's trident glows with golden light, and it's clear that he was not expecting that to happen. As the stones slide aside, Manta looks into a hidden chamber under the throne that rises up. A new stone statue rises, pushing the mermaids out of the way. This new statue has 5 of the trench creatures positioned around a golden scepter. "This is it," Black Manta says. "The seventh relic. The scepter of the dead king." "The weapon that sank Atlantis!" Bum, bum, bum. Dramatic reverb. This is where Geoff Johns' opening scene, with the others finding the Atlantean relics, comes into play. That scene was placed at the start of this issue in order to contextualize this moment. The break between issues is the perfect moment to add in that kind of scene, as opposed to working it into the flow of the narrative now in order to explain what was going on here. I do have to complain ever so slightly that the flashback sequence at the start of the issue was inked. The creative team has pretty firmly established in previous issues that flashbacks are uninked, with colorist Rod Reis working directly over penciler Ivan Reis's artwork. This could be a good old-fashioned mistake, that the team just caught up in the work, or maybe their deadline, that they forgot this idea. Or maybe it could have something to do with the fact that this issue has 3 inkers working on it. We've got longtime inker Joe Prado, who has been on this book since the beginning, Andy Lanning, who joined last issue with issue 10, and I just forgot to mention it, very sorry, and Jonathan Glapion, who joins with this issue. When your comic is this moody, with lighting this dramatic, you really need a team that can handle the load. And so far, this arc has actually made incredibly artistically consistent. Like, I couldn't even tell you that 2 other inkers had joined the team because their work is so seamless. But this does mean that the idea that flashbacks go uninked might have been forgotten in all of the work getting done on time. This doesn't detract from the pages at all, as they are still beautifully executed. It's just thematically inconsistent. Or perhaps they don't count as qualifying for the theme because they aren't inside of Arthur's head. All of the previous flashbacks that we've seen were Arthur remembering things and... Wait, holy sh...
No swearing.
I think that's it. It just occurred to me that the flashback that we saw in issue 8, when Arthur freaked out on the paparazzi, that scene was uninked. That scene was inked too. Flashbacks that are memories get uninked because they're inside of Arthur's head. They aren't abject reality. They are Arthur's tainted memories. Flashbacks like Arthur's freakout or the other's mission in Russia, holy...
No swearing.
That scene was inked too, and this scene here are abject reality. This is what actually happened, and so it is inked to fit in with the rest of what is going on in the comic in the modern day, because that's real. Wow. Wow, I love that idea. I'm almost a full year into Aquaman, and I'm only just getting that artistic detail. Wow. So what else happened? Shin is confirmed to not be an ally with Manta, so there is still a mystery bad guy out there, and that's fine. We've seen a few scenes with Shin not knowing what's going on, so I do think that tracks pretty well. We do have his notes revealing how to find the scepter, and I just still don't understand how or why Shin would know that. Arthur clearly stopped hanging with this man after the death of his father, which is when he found the trident and the others got the artifacts. But Shin knowing how to triangulate the scepter's position means that he would have had to have time to study them, right? Why would he guess that activating 2 of them would lead to the 7th? And why would someone hide all 6 artifacts in the same room as the 7th and make it so that you only needed 2 of them to be used at the same time to uncover the 7th? I would have thought that, like, as soon as the others had the artifacts, they would have tested what they could do, right? I'd be, like, holding up the globe of transportation and being like, so what does this do? And then it zaps you from one end of the room to the other. And then somebody else would be like, oh, what does this do? And then it does whatever it does. Like, you'd think this is something that would have already happened just accidentally. But I guess that's not what happened, so fine. One of the things that I particularly like about this scene is the trench creatures being around the scepter when it gets revealed. That is ominous as hell. And I do not remember what it's supposed to mean. But I do like that Johns is tying that first arc into this, even in such a subtle way. Because nobody in the comic notices the creatures. Arthur doesn't point it out, Shin doesn't seem to notice it, but it does seem to indicate that the creatures are more connected to Atlantis and to the dead king than maybe we were led to believe. Those creatures were pitched to us as a separate entity from Atlantis. They were just a natural piece of evolution that happened way over here, and this Atlantean ship just happened to, crash into their nest, but maybe not. Maybe those creatures were put there for a reason. That's an interesting long-form mystery. We also have Manta stating that this scepter is what sank Atlantis, and that ship that we found in the trench had information about him planning to sink Atlantis. Again, there's a connection here that nobody is really paying attention to in the story, but Johns is making available for us, the audience. If we want to take the time to theorize about this stuff, well, we can, which is always fun. That's one of the funnest parts about reading monthly comic books, is guessing what's going to come next. As we open issue 12, Mara is sifting through the scattered paperwork that remains after Manta's abduction of Dr. Shin. A cell phone rings, and Mara answers it. It's the operative, and he says that they need to meet. Can she swim as fast as Arthur? Her reply is one word. Faster. Mara dives into the water, and she is propelled by her own hydrokinesis. She then launches herself into the air, somehow managing with one shot to perfectly land on the back hatch of the living room. The others are there to greet her, and the operative sticks out a hand to shake. And I do not recall Mara shaking it at all. She just walks right on in. There is a brief back and forth between everyone. We see friction between Mara and Yawara, both of whom think that Arthur is acting strangely, and both of whom blame the other one for it. Yawara because she represents Arthur's past, and Mara because she represents Arthur's present. Vostok thinks that Arthur is doing this in order to protect them, and Prisoner thinks that he is a selfish jerk who doesn't care about them at all. None of that matters, though. Just tell me where he is, Mara demands. We then cut to where he is, which is a nice transition, and join Arthur in watching Black Manta's recovery of the scepter. He gloats for a minute, savoring the thought of drowning Aquaman in sorrow. He tells Dr. Shin that he should be proud. This couldn't have happened without him. Shin, bruised and miserable looking, is anything but celebratory. That scepter belongs to Arthur, he says, and whatever you're doing, know that he will stop you. Seeing this faith in him, Arthur's mind flashes back to when he was a kid. He remembers Dr. Shin helping him, explaining that the fish are his friends, that when he asks them to help, they can help him, just like Dr. Shin helps him. In the present day, Manta orders one of his lackeys to kill Dr. Shin. They've gotten all they need from him. The lackey cocks his gun with pleasure. Aquaman's trident suddenly spears through his chest, killing the lackey. Aquaman dives into the fight, retrieving the trident, punching another lackey in the face. They all open fire and bullets bounce off of his skin. The impacts do still hurt him, and small bursts of blood erupt from his skin, but Aquaman is otherwise unharmed. Black Manta hefts the scepter, and then leaps into the air. And he brings it down like he's swinging an axe. Aquaman dodges the clumsy blow easily, but when the scepter hits the floor, a boom fills the entire chamber, and it begins to rumble. Fissures of water erupt from the floor, and the island shakes. Parts of the ceiling begin to drop from the vibration. Aquaman dodges one of them and dives into Dr. Shin, saving him from another chunk of debris, but the stone does pin him to the floor. Aquaman tells Shin to keep his head down and get out of here. Black Manta stands over Aquaman, hefting the scepter like an axe again. I guess this is goodbye. But before the final blow was struck, a pair of jaguars tackle Manta. The others, and Mara, charge into the chamber, sweeping away the lackeys. As they're all fighting, Aquaman is able to gather his strength and throw off the stone that pins him. Damn it, he curses. I don't need you here, and I didn't need you to drag Mara into this. He needs to handle this alone. Mara points out that he has never asked to go it alone before with her. So why now? Why is he pushing her away when he needs her the most? Why is he hiding things from her? Because he is not the man that she thinks she is, Arthur says. She knows about his past, Mara replies, about how his father died and about how he killed Manta's father. That's not all, Arthur says. Meanwhile, Black Manta's heat blasts have driven off Yawara and her jaguars. So she has found Dr. Shin, and it's clear to her that he was involved in this disaster. This time, her jaguars get to feed. Vostok quickly dashes in their way, though. Dr. Shin is unarmed, he protests, as Yawara complains. Aquaman and Mara join them. Arthur adds that Shin is innocent. At least this time. Yawara tries to argue otherwise, and Shin adds his own apology for everything. While Arthur is wrestling with his conflicted feelings, a massive stone block falls from the ceiling. Prisoner is able to protect them all with his force field, but the stone is so thick that Operative's thermal vision can't get a read through it. He's lost Black Manta. Aquaman tells the others to get Shin out of here. Manta is his. But from the shadows, the hunter rises. Black Manta drops directly behind Aquaman, the scepter swinging in again. And Vostok jumps in front of it. The blade of the scepter cleaves into his right shoulder, biting deep. As the cosmonaut falls into Arthur's arms, Black Manta steps up into the shadows again. One by one, Aquaman. And then he's gone. Arthur grabs Vostok's hand. He told them not to come. He didn't want anyone else getting hurt. Blood running down his nose, Vostok says that they didn't want him to get hurt. Arthur shouldn't be upset with himself. There is no need. Vostok's greatest fear has been vanquished, and his greatest hope granted. He didn't die alone. Make sure that you don't either. Prisoner's force field drops. He's dead. Tears run down Yawara's face. The operative watches silently. Mara gently puts her hands on Arthur's back and says his name. Crying as well, Arthur grips the trident's hilt tighter. He's going to kill him, Aquaman promises. Black Manta dies now. Where do I begin? I guess with the big moment. Vostok's sacrifice. And get it out of the way. I kind of hate it. We already lost Kahina, and I guess a part of me just assumed that losing one of the others was losing enough. Johns killed Kahina to prove how capable Manta is, and to add some tension to the upcoming fight scenes. But it felt like that tension was supposed to be the classic tension of comic books, right? No one expects the Green Goblin to actually kill Spider-Man, but you suspend your disbelief because the Green Goblin did kill Gwen Stacy once upon a time. We want that tension, and so we choose to believe in it when we read these stories. And even if I thought the prisoner might die back in issue 10, I still didn't really expect him to die. And with all of the others gathered, plus Aquaman, plus Mara, I really had no reason to suspect that anybody else would die here. Everyone surviving is kind of the climax of this story, right? Where the lone hero who's fighting to protect his friends is backed up by those very same friends against his wishes, and together they stop the villain using the power of teamwork and friendship. They don't fail and have one of them die. The bad guy isn't supposed to get away with it. So if you couldn't tell, this death really hit me. I'm actually super impressed by how much I am feeling this. I certainly don't remember Vostok dying when I was first buying these comics, and I definitely don't remember caring about him dying when it did happen. This is one of those times that doing the breakdown of the comic has really led me to greater insight into the characters, because I've been taking the time to sit and think about them and how they fit together and how they relate to one another. I won't lie, John's making Vostok someone who has trouble connecting with other people instantly made me sympathize with him too, because I struggle with that as well. I have had that moment of waiting for my friends to invite me along, and the breakthrough that I could just ask people to do stuff with me, and they would. So there is definitely a little bit of me that I saw inside of Vostok when we first met him. Along those lines, one of the things that I really appreciate about this issue is Arthur's continued mission to save Dr. Shin. I think that if you asked Arthur from the start of this arc to this issue, he would have said that he was motivated by the desire to kill Black Manta. But then Kahina died, and I think that Arthur's real motivation is revealed to be protecting his friends, and he intends to protect them by killing Black Manta, but it's not revenge that's motivating him, it's the defensive need to protect his people. But then in this issue, Aquaman is all set up to kill Manta. He could have hurled that trident from the shadows right through Manta's chest, like he did the dude who was going to kill Shin. But he didn't kill Black Manta. He saved Dr. Shin instead. Because as angry at the Doctor as he was, he also can't forget how close they were. And maybe he doesn't know how much Shin still means to him consciously. Like, he doesn't show the others how much they mean to him either, but he still fights and kills to keep them all safe. Again, that's just a greater level of depth to Arthur's character than I was expecting to get from any comic book in general, but this comic book in specific. Like, wow. It also means that moving forward into the end of this arc, we'll probably see Arthur push everyone away even harder. He tried to keep Mera out of this fight because he wanted to protect her. He tried to keep the others out of this fight in order to protect them. But now Vostok has died. And worse, he died protecting Arthur. Just like his dad died. That trauma has clearly shaped Arthur, and I can't see it not playing a role in this story moving forward, or at the very least, in the overall themes of the comic. I am still left a bit confused by what Manta is hoping to accomplish here. The scepter clearly has some kind of power, as it is shaking the whole island when it made landfall earlier in the fight, and we are told that the weapon sunk Atlantis, so it clearly packs more of an oomph than it looks. But what exactly does Black Manta need it for? He's killed Kahina already, he's killed Vostok now, he could probably have done some serious damage to Arthur if he had just pushed that fight. But instead he doesn't, he just slinks away to do what exactly? I'm almost starting to suspect that Manta's goal here isn't to ruin Arthur's life, but something much worse. Something bigger. Because, like, from a writing standpoint, we're now in the final act of this story. Now is when the cast should rally together. Manta will reveal his big plan, and then they'll overcome their differences to stop him and save the day. That's a lot to do, and we don't have a lot of comic left to do it in, right? So something else has to be going on. Given how the first arc of this book was 4 issues dealing with the trench, and then the 2 standalone issues exploring Arthur and Mera as characters, I kind of thought that Johns was just setting us up with the expectation that each 6-issue trade paperback of this book would be paced a little bit differently, that he was playing with the pacing of the stories. But with this issue, issue 12, that should close out this 6-issue story arc, and clearly it does not. And that's because this is actually an 8-issue story arc. Technically, it's a 7-issue story arc, but we're going to get into that. Next week, journey back with me to the beginning, as the Zeroth issue of Aquaman tells the tale of how Arthur first went to Atlantis. And then, after that, issue 13 reveals why Black Manta wanted the scepter, and the next step in the story of the others. Join me for Comic Book Breakdown episode 26.8 of Aquaman, The Value of Aquaman. Everyone, there are a million podcasts vying for your time and attention, and I'd like to thank you for listening to mine. If you would like to get in touch with me, to share a concern, request a series, compliment me, berate me, whatever you like, send me an email at cbbreakdown@gmail.com. Otherwise, thanks for listening.